Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome at the library of BMC. I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Stefano Gervasoni here, and thanks for accepting our invitation. Usually in these talks, I start with a very simple question. How would you define music for yourself?
Yeah, very simple, but hard to answer. For me, music is my natural way of expressing not only my feelings, but also my ideas. Unfortunately, I'm not able to fix them in a rational way, so speaking correctly and theoretically. That's why I think that music is my best language, even if it is not a language.
But is it, I mean, how much is it important for you to use it as a language of the instincts, and how much do you use structures and ideas that come outside of music?
Yeah. Now, music is a very important experience for everybody, because I think it has to do with the rational part of the human being, and since it's a collective word, because you need musicians to perform your pieces, it obliges you to transform what is personal and deep and maybe difficult to be expressed in words into something really communicative, like music directions. The score is a sort of intermediate main in between what is completely rational for me and personal and unique towards the musicians who are the real interpreters, in the sense of speaking and giving tangible support to my ideas. Then there's the audience. But interpreters are really my voice. That's why we were speaking this morning with Peter Oetbosch about the importance of writing very accurate scores, because they have this big responsibility to speak on behalf of the composer, who couldn't speak.
How did you get to composition? So did you know already at the age of 3 that you will become a composer, or was it
no,
strike from the heavens?
It was by chance, as all the beautiful things in life. In my family there was no musician, and also my parents obliged me to have very serious studies. I mean, in a practical way, finding a job position. And they decided that I should have been a chemist. So I did my studies in chemistry, and I was completely unsatisfied. Also the relationship with the professors, the school.
Music is a kind of chemistry.
Yeah, if you want. I wanted to say that indirectly, and also thanks to this anti-pedagogical way of my parents. Please don't deal with music because you won't earn any money. This pushed me towards music like a sort of forbidden desire. And finally, when I was 18, I decided that I obliged, reverse situation, my parents to give me the freedom of really studying and become a musician. I was studying piano until 18. That was for them a sort of private hobby, very usually in countries like Italy, where there's a music tradition, but school is not, and education is not so well organized and developed. Music is considered like a private hobby, so they gave me this permission of going to studying piano. But then it was my personal decision becoming a composer. 18 when I met.
You met Luigi Nono.
Luigi Nono. So Luigi Nono was a very important personality in Italy, not only in the music sense, but culturally and politically. And it was quite famous in the good sense. So not famous because he was successful, but he was really, he had a voice in the cultural field.
Could you please explain, or did this meeting? Or how did it happen?
So it happened at the age of 17 or 16 something. I was discovering contemporary music, listening by Berio music and Luigi Nono. So it was very easy to listen Luigi Nono music and Berio at the time. Nowadays it's really much more difficult. And I remember once on the TV, the Italian state TV, Rai, they were broadcasting Gran Sole Carico d'Amore, the second opera after Intolleranza by Luigi Nono, and I spent 2 or 3 hours, I can't remember how long it was, but for me, young boy, it was really long, but not boring. For some reasons, I was completely attracted by what I could watch on the TV, not being the normal stuff that time, and also nowadays we can watch on the TV. So no entertainment programs, but something really tough and long and dense and complicated to be understood.
And then you said, okay, I want to meet this guy, and then you called him, or how did it happen?
Exactly. No, it was very, very simple. On the yellow pages, I looked for Luigi Nono Venezia, and the number was there. I called, he answered, and he accepted to have this long meeting at the Giudecca, where he lived, with Nuria Schoenberg, something like very impressive for me. Nuria simply received us asking if he wanted a coffee. There was a friend of mine together to encourage me. And Luigi Nono was very, talk a lot of plenty of things. I remember he talked also politics, and he said that I think it was the 80 or 81. He talked about populism that time, which is now, at least in Italy, a very important
Not only
subject.
in Italy.
Not only in Italy. Yeah. Populism, the damages of populism.
You mentioned that Luigi Nono's opera had a great impact on you, and if one thinks about an Italian composer, the first association that comes to mind is vocal music, or the human voice. And the first piece I chose for this talk is a piece you wrote in the early 90s, Liszt B, and this is a movement where there is a long solo for soprano. Could you please explain a bit for the listeners the background for this piece?
Yeah, the background is that so Luigi Nono was very inspiring for me. You know, Luigi Nono music is very at the limit of the border of the silence. Also, when we met, he was composing his last opera, Prometeo. He was really dealing with this pianissimo and very subtle variation, fluctuation in the sound, color, in the pitches. That was my source of inspiration. And in a sort of naive, but not so naive way, I decided that one poet who could be very close to the Luigi Nono world, in addition to all the poets Luigi Nono set into music. Luigi Nono didn't work with Emily Dickinson poems, but I think that they are very nono style. So in particular, one poem where there's the image of a bee, so the little insect, who is producing this bzz, and the bzz is a sort of nono melody, so very teeny melody with little variation inside, very rich but also very minimal. And that was the beginning of this cycle with poems by Emily Dickinson. In the middle, there's this big cadenza, solo voice, again, another way of being minimal because the instruments are not playing, the Pierrot quintet, they are not playing, they simply produce some resonances from the solo voice.
Okay, so let us listen now to the third part of Liszt B. And this is a music which sets poem numbered 1602 by Emily Dickinson. Etc. So, I mean, is it so? I chose this piece because I think it's beautiful music. But do you feel a special inclination towards vocal music and the human voice?
Yes, I think all my music is vocal music, even if I work only with instruments.
With two saxophones, for example.
With two saxophones, yeah. Yeah, this, but this is also the nono idea, or nono talked about Bellini. Bellini as this pure melody, so the Italian opera composer. I don't like so much Bellini, but for Nono, the melody, Bellini melody, was a sort of pure essence of the voice, and maybe this fascination for the voice from Bellini to Nono is still active to me. My main reference is Monteverdi, another Italian composer, so the opera inventor. maybe because it is related to really to the sources, how to imagine that the voice is so powerful to create a story, to build, to develop a story, and up to a big opera. That's really something from the voice to the theater. This is really great, yeah.
So you said that you write vocal music even if you write for instruments, but it is true for you what is said about very often about Mozart, that he always wrote opera. Even his piano concerti and sonatas are operas. So opera or theater or theatricality is also very important for you. Is it true?
Yes, even in this microscopic piece, List B, there's some theater, and I like not really. Yeah, I like opera, but the opera is not the best frame setting for my music, because for me theater has to be very minimal. That means that in a music performance, some details can create a sort of theatrical setting. In the List B, the fact that the singer stopped to be accompanied by the musicians is a sort of theatrical decision, because when they come back again, it's a different situation. Also, the singer in this piece, the piece you listened, is not only singing but also articulating words, syllables by the lips. And we couldn't listen to this part, but towards the end, there's another repetition. Repetition is important. She starts repeating the two last verses, sometimes skipping a syllable. So instead of saying, singing with the voice the full verse, there's a hole where the singer simply moves the lips. And when the singer moves the lips, there's a piccolo doing what the singer should have sung. These kind of little actions for me are already theater. And if we think of Monteverdi madrigals, Combattimento di Tancredi Clorinda is sort of opera, a miniature opera. This is something really powerful for me, and I like this kind of not showy theatrical situation. The piece we will listen is also sort of a sort of theatrical visual dimension.
You studied in Italy and then you moved to Paris, and
yes.
You still live in Paris. What made you go to Paris, and how did you get there?
Yeah, but language, because Italian and French are very close, so easier than going to London or to United States.
Or to Budapest.
Or to Budapest, but I went to Budapest in '89 for the first time. Because Nono mentioned, and he was one of the promoters of György Kurtag in Italy. So through Nono, Italians discovered Kurtag since the beginning of his international career. He was already in France, and maybe already known in France, György Kurtag. Immediately after Italy, thanks to Luigi Nono.
And you came to Szombathely.
And came to Szombathely because we wanted to have a contact with György Kurtag, who, like Nono, didn't teach composition, but taught a lot about music, performing, interpretation, so that also composing. And there was also Ligeti in Szombathely that year, '89. And Peter Rothbosch was conducting Ensemble Moderne and recording Quasi una fantasia by Kurtag.
Okay. So, and then you went to Paris. how did
And
it affect?
and then I went to Paris because it is very close to Italy, especially to my town, Bergamo. Is 1,000 kilometers. The language is easier. I won a scholarship for IRCAM, so I went to IRCAM with 1 year already paid by this scholarship. I discovered that it was really much better, a lot of opportunities for young composers in Paris than in Italy. Unfortunately, Italy was poor, as not many opportunities to offer to contemporary, to young composers. So we have, I'm a little nationalistic in that, very good composers, but unfortunately all the music world is very fragile. So orchestras, education, all the students, Italian students, go abroad to study composition at professional level. And I did the same in the beginning of the 90s. After finishing in Milano Conservatoire, I got some commissions, and I started becoming a professional composer.
If you go to Paris, which, thanks to IRCAM and Boulez, was one of the big centers of contemporary music, but when I think, or when one thinks about the different regions like Italy or the United States or England or Germany or Paris, France, are there different contemporary music cultures? So if you go to Paris, you will become a different composer compared to, let's say, you would go to I don't know, Hamburg, or
yeah.
What do you think?
But maybe I have to say that those years, internet wasn't already discovered. So nobody used internet. Having access to scores was something problematic for an Italian student, because my only possibility was stealing scores from the Ricordi shop in Milano. And these recorded scores were had very large.
But now you belong to Ricordi, don't you?
Yeah, so I don't steal anymore because there's no more the Ricordi shop in Milano. But these big size scores were difficult to steal. But we managed to steal scores because the library, the Conservatoire, was almost inaccessible, and there was almost no contemporary music scores. Maybe Dalla Piccola, Petrassi, but no Luigi Nono, no Berio. Yeah.
So you were kind of offline hackers.
Yeah. Going to Paris was one way of have a deeper contact with the sources, with the scores, because in the beginning of the 90s we could really read the scores at IRCAM in the libraries, in the bookshop, but I didn't steal in Paris, and also we could have contact with the composers, with the artists. IRCAM invited several composers, so I met Lachemann there, Griset, very important composers, and I discovered that they were all like Luigi Nono, normal human being. Being in Italy for me was a strange experience, because these names were sort of mythic names, like Chopin or Mozart, and they were completely in the cloud, not in the internet, but in my cloud, totally untangible, inaccessible.
Yeah, the next piece we are going to listen to, or a short excerpt, was written for Ensemble Intercontemporain, and it is entitled Euphonique. How do you pronounce it? Because
Euphonique,
it's a non-existing word.
Word in French.
In French.
But not existing.
Yes. So this is part of a bigger project. Could you please explain?
Yeah, the project. This piece is now an independent piece. the title is all the same, Euphonique, but the length is twice. And in the short version is part of a 7-chapter piece composed by 7 different composers. Each composer has to deal with one day of the Genesis. And we got a commission with specific constraints. One was having a sort of important pitch, E flat. E flat is good for me because my name is Stefano. S is E flat. And 10 minutes long, plus some constraints about the percussion.
And could you choose the day of the Genesis?
Yes, I choose the day.
And why did you choose
the day? Yeah, because it's the day where God separated the human beings from the animals. And the idea of the piece is that this harmony between human beings and animals was at the point to be broken. So the piece finishes with a sort of action which will be developed in the second part of the piece, which is not part of the Genesis project, where I show that the human beings become hunters, and this harmony this harmony with the animals is lost because we start hunting the animals and eating the animals.
Okay, let us listen now to the last 4 minutes of the first part of the piece. Could you please tell us a bit about, I mean, what you can or will about the compositional process? So, do you need a commission, or do you start with an external idea or some musical problem? So, how does it work, for example, with this piece?
Yeah. So let me say that.
Let us talk about chemistry.
Yeah, chemistry. Yeah, because anyway. The problem is how to transform dreams into reality. So, in order to transform dreams into reality, you need interpreters, you need the situation, and you need the listeners, because I'm talking about my dreams, but you are not interested in my words. You are maybe more interested in how they sound. And unfortunately, this process needs also money, because musicians have to be paid, and maybe composer can be paid to do this job of transforming dreams. So
I never heard that. Do composers need money?
No, because dreaming doesn't cost any money, but this transformation process is very expensive. But I can compose really for me. But is that music? Because finally, a piece of score, a score, is a piece of music. But without the musicians, it's a piece of paper, and this is something completely useless. So in my drawers, you can find some piece of paper with some pieces inside, but this is not music. Music is really producing, performing, not only performing, rehearsing. We make much more music in rehearsing a piece than in proposing to an audience the final result, because it's a way of exchanging with all the musicians, the conductor, and the musicians. We are all part of this sort of lost paradise, who was the very harmonious world where human beings, different human beings, could live with different species of animals. So an orchestra, for me, is a metaphor of this paradise where different nationalities, different experience, different human beings can work together to produce this magic world, which is a piece of music.
If you finish a piece, sometimes you use ideas from the pieces to develop them and to turn them into another piece. Yeah. Like from this piece, another piece was born, which we are going to hear live. How does it work? Why do you work on?
Yeah, because composing is ideas? A complex process. And also we have to deal with the past, what other composers have written, what we know about the past, because sometimes it happened to us to write something which has already been written in a different way by another composer. So we discover the hot water. But knowing the past is very important, because we don't have to repeat or to fake any Bach, any other Mozart, any other very good composer. So we have to recreate the past. And sometimes this past is also my personal past. Composer, personal past, very often composers keep a previous piece or a fragment of a piece, and they work again because it is these fragments, these pieces are so powerful that they contain other ideas in addition to the explicit idea. And that was the case of Euphonique. The process is reversed. First, the piece with two oboes, then Euphonique, in which I develop the full ODOI for two oboes. So you saw there's an oboe as a obbligato instrument. The second oboe is the instrumentation for ensemble of the second line of this duo. And then I wrote the version for two saxophones, soprano saxophone, which we'll listen tonight.
Okay, and you were kind enough to propose the idea to show some excerpts, because we have two wonderful musicians, Erzsébet Seleljo and Viktor Nagy. So before we listen to this whole piece, you can show some excerpts. Do you want me to show the beginning of the piece again? Just to
why not?
Or it's not the beginning, it's just the beginning of this excerpt.
So this motive,
microphone.
Sorry, pa pi pa pi pa pi pa, is a sort of leitmotiv of the ODOI, and it is also a sort of obsessive figure in my life, because my viola concerto, composed beginning of my stay in Paris, 1994. Also developed the same motive. Ta ti ta ti ta. It's sort of magic and meaningful, simple signal for me. I cannot say more, but it is very, 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 very important to me. So years later, when I wrote ODOI, I developed the same motive. Also because it comes from one of the reference from the past is Bach cantata Actus Tragicus, where the two recorder, the two flutes, play unison this sort of motive with different rhythm. Pom pipi pom pipi pom pipi pom titita. Kurtak made a beautiful arrangement for the two piano for a hand piano of the sonatina. And this idea of being one instrument with some little moments where the two instruments are not producing the same pitch, so they become two voices, was very touching to me, because of Bach, of course. And maybe this is one of the reasons I wanted to develop the same idea in several pieces, included this ODOI. We can perform the beginning, first you and then Viktor. So this is the first page full version with the two instruments. Maybe you can play 2 lines, Erzsébet, only you, and then only Viktor. Okay, and Viktor. Okay, so maybe you have understood that the idea is very simple. There's a tenuto note, and then there's the tista, which the note is the basis, and then there's another interval, the second, ta, tita, 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 coming and coming again. It's the third note of a triplet. Sometimes Viktor plays another note, like an ascending scale, which is the second note of a triplet. That means that together they can produce a sort of triplet with the free note, ta-ta-ti, ta-ti-ti, 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 but it is made by the two instruments together, pretending that they are like a unique instrument. So this ambiguity between being a solo or becoming a duo is the idea of the whole piece. And we talk about the minimal theater in a piece of music when performing it. So I wanted to stress this because you see there are a lot of stands, also because in music we have a problem, how to turn pages. Now with the tablets can be easier. But this is made on purpose because I wanted to stress the idea that this solo duo was a sort of attempt of being like a symbiotic identity. So there are two persons trying to be the same person. And this setting where Erzsébet is going from the audience to the far from the audience, and the contrary by Viktor, means that in the middle they are together. So, and in the middle they are exactly producing this sort of solo tiridi, 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 because they are facing each other and also playing in a very complementary way the duo, becoming only one instrument. Beginning, you will listen the motive, ta ri ra ri ra, and it will be clear that it is a solo by Erzsébet. The end, at the end, we will have the reverse situation because Viktor will be there and he will play for the third time the same idea. Da-ri, 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 da. So the idea is that this symbiotic identity is a sort of very fugitive one, and by chance or by like a miracle, you can stay together, but this identity is so fragile that they have to separate again. So they reach in the middle and they separate again with a sort of melancholic vision of the world.
Can we listen to the whole piece now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now let us listen to ODOI II by Stefano Gervasoni. it can be also interpreted as the story of a friendship or a marriage or a relationship. You mentioned that when you met Luigi Nono, he was a great figure of the Italian cultural life. What do you think about the role of the composer today, decades after this situation? Do you think that a composer can be as great a figure as Luigi Nono once was in Italy?
Another very difficult question. Maybe because of my age, 60 years old, I've seen with a lot of enthusiasm. I saw that this enthusiasm in the 80s in Italy, and I think in France, Germany, is a little lost because of this big hope, who was also the Schoenberg hope that one day we could listen to progressive music, and with the modern music in some ways we could change the world. It's a sort of utopic idea. Music is something very private, very, very nourishing if maybe I'm talking about Italy and only Italy, if they could, I mean politicians, they could understand the importance of music education, not only because we know music and we go to concerts, we are able to sing, to play an instrument, to stay well together when making music, but also how important is music for the development of our faculties, like a sort of very nourishing discipline for our brain and our body, etc., etc. Unfortunately, this is completely neglected in Italy. In France, the situation is better because compared with Italy, there's this maybe stronger organization. But in general, music is considered like entertainment, and maybe nowadays for a composer, so entertainment means that Mozart is the same as any bad composer composing some pleasant music to be listened when we do other things than listening, so eating, reading, drinking, etc. This is mainly the idea of music in my country, and in general, as music is considered by the normal population. I'm not saying that we live in a world where there's only ignorant people, but music education is very important, and the problem is that we don't understand how important is music education for the development of a person. So for me, the main act than a composer, than an artist, that an artist can do nowadays is maybe not proclaiming anything about politics, because Luigi Nono was involved in the left party, etc., etc. So it was really a political thinking by musical means. In my case, and in the case of I think the artists in general, nowadays the word could be how to resist. Not the word, the action would be how to resist to this idea that music is pure entertainment, because music is knowledge, is education, is development of our potential, human potential, and how to resist is anyway explaining which is the difference between art, music, and entertainment. And musicians do this, not only composing but also performing high level, and not performing always the same pieces, because you know entertainment means Beethoven Fifth, Tchaikovsky Pathetica Symphony, things like that. How to show and to prove that the music patrimoine, the French word, the music world is so big, so dense, so important, simply by making music at the top level. I'm discovering the Budapest Music Center. So it's something with an enormous potential, with a lot of energy. Being here, and you say, completely enveloped by scores. It's something really important for me and very emotional, but means also something politically, because the simple fact of preserving all this music and try to project this into the future, for me is a political action nowadays.
You mentioned entertainment, and I would like to ask you about your relationship to popular styles beyond Tchaikovsky, because you had a really interesting project 15 years ago when you incorporated, or you somehow connected to your own work, some fado songs from the Portuguese popular tradition. Could you please explain this whole, was it just an adventure for you, or you like this type of music?
No, I like, first, I'm passionate by fado music. And also it is in my tradition. Recently I made a project, sort of cantata, upon Pierpaolo Pasolini texts. And Pierpaolo Pasolini, the poet and the filmmaker, was really interested in the end of the 50th, last century, and the 60s, about the discovery of how ancestrals are, how old are our tradition. And he worked together with ethnomusicologists to the rediscovery of some practice in the small villages, especially in South Italy, where these kind of rituals were still alive, and somewhere there's in Sardinia, they are still alive, especially rituals for funerals, weddings, things like that. So composers, Berio, Nono, and other Italian composers were attracted to this. In the 60s, they worked on traditional music. Then there was a sort of political message inside, related to people, so to the basis of the humanity. But in my case, this work on the past and on tradition as a model, which is I don't want to flatter anybody here, but Bartók did this work, because sources, the original sources are really very inspiring for a composer. Being in contact with the roots of the culture, much more than what culture produced along the centuries, by developing what was popular into what was very refined and art music. Yeah, yep. But fado.
Yes, okay.
Fado. So I did on the fado music the same work as Bartók did on traditional Romanian and Hungarian songs. So I transcribed literally from the discs by Amália Rodrigues, who was a Portuguese fado singer by excellence, and I did the same. So I had a sort of ethnomusicological approach to the transcription. I tried to really to be very faithful to the original in transcribing the voice, the melisms, the ornamentation of the voices, which are very important on the fado, and the accompaniment, the Portuguese guitar, which is a sort of alter ego of the voice, also very melismatic, the Spanish guitar, the bass guitar. So everything, I selected 12 fados, and I made this very attentive transcription. Then I re-elaborated this material with my personal vision. So it becomes something very rich, very colorful, but close to the origins, because every single note is a fado, authentic fado, by Amalia Rodriguez.
But it's very interesting for me because it's there are a lot of movements in this piece, and in some movements you mix the two, your own music and the original fado, and in some you leave the fado in its own way, and then your own music comes after that.
Yeah. So the fado content is the pure fado content, so tonal music, because fado is songs, tonal songs. The accompaniment is different, but the melodies and the two main parts, Spanish guitar, Portuguese guitar, are completely the same. In addition to this, because it's a long cycle of 24 songs, and it is a sort of trip, like ODOI, small trip, long trip, also binary trip. There's a fado singer and the baritone. The baritone is singing my music, another cycle of based on Camões, the Portuguese poet.
From the 60th century.
From the 60s. And the other cycle, alternative to the Camões cycle, is the fado cycles. So there's the experience is more or less like in ODOI, that there's a fado song followed by a contemporary music song, then another fado song. It's really a binary black and white situation. You are listening the nostalgic, warming fado music, and then you switch to a very cold and strange contemporary music piece. Then you are back again into this familiar world, and then back again to the contemporary music. This sort of shock was a kind of experience I wanted to test on my audience, because I think that nowadays, you know, maybe better than me, music, we produce art music, and I insist on this term, art music, in a world which is very rich and very mixed. So we can write pure art music, but listen jazz or our experience is very rich. Our ears and our brain is filled by shocks, music shocks. So and I wanted to recreate on stage this sort of peculiar situation we now are all experiencing in life, where commercial music or traditional music is always mixed with our contemporary pure music.
Okay, let us listen now to two movements, number 10 and 11 from Com Que Vos.
Meu amor, ist ein Gang. Ist ja wohl auch in und Gang. Uten og sta, det sesja. Nava cosa, quala tu seja, che na terra perpetuo so escat tu. Na, ergo des sesja. Na volte dunque desto peggio. Ma ziste puro il tecco mi, ma ziste puro il tecco mi sedana. E come grande tetra, ma ziste puro il tecco mi sedana. Che come grande tetra te morte, usai tu, ma ziste puro il tecco mi sedana. Che come grande tetra te morte, usai tu mi sedana, ma ziste ma se. E la parte vai comandere umana ignora
I wanted to make a little comment. Yeah. There's again this idea of a symbiotic identity. So, concave voice in English is with which voice. So, how to find the good voice to say something, but also it's a female voice or a male voice, the voice of a song, or the voice of a symphony. These kind of questions. The fado are there's the electronics also together with the instruments, but in the recording it wasn't so evident because it was a live recording. And in this piece, the fado, Meo Amor, it's a very sad story about two people who were obliged to separate because, Portuguese were always traveling. And the lady stayed at home, consumed by the nostalgia. And this consumption was the source for the electronics, because in the Portuguese language, all these sibilant sounds are emphasized when you really speak very well Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese. And the electronics try to work on this sound effect by the language, from the language. It wasn't so evident in the recording. On the contrary, when the baritone sings, you can maybe, you have listened to some sound effect based on the same, also reproduced by the instruments. That was an example of how to project a traditional piece of music into a sort of modern environment by developing some little details which are very significant because they deal with the language. So they are really the source of the sources. Yeah. And also one little thing more, this idea of cross-overing music and the music experience and the countries. The traditional fado accompaniment is a trio: guitar, Portuguese guitar, Spanish guitar, and the bass guitar. This trio was on stage together with another trio. So for me, this is the West trio. Portugal is the West Europe. Together with another trio, which is the East trio with cymbalon, accordion, and viola. And during the cycle, the West trio could be the accompaniment for the fado, but also for the original fado, but also for the contemporary music fado. And fado could be also accompanied by the East trio, because for me, cymbalon is a sort of Portuguese guitar, so metallic strings. Also the way you play inside the instruments make this relationship with the two opposite sides of Europe.
One of your newest pieces, or one of your newest big pieces, is a piece for choir. What is your relationship to this very ancient force, performing force?
Yeah, because I'm very admirative of Monteverdi. And Monteverdi wrote this big oratorio, Vespers, Vespri della Beata Vergine in Italian, working on cantus firmus, polyphony, counterpoint, very rich counterpoint, and also big settings of instruments, rich accompanied, really the triumph of Baroque music. So it was a model. And I wanted to write 1 hour long piece of music with only choir and electronics. And this piece was based on a cycle of poems by a Spanish contemporary composer, José Ángel Valente, who died died in 2001, who wrote a sort of oratorio text called Tres Lesiones de Tinieblas, being inspired by the French repertoire of Leçons de Ténèbres for the Holy Week. So the Valente wrote this text with a music reference, strong music reference, and for me it was quite natural to develop this music reference into this sort of oratorio or tenebra lessons with a modern text, with absolutely no quotations from the past, but conceived like a traditional, very contrapuntistic piece of music with the challenge of asking the audience to stay attentive for 1 hour with this very contrapuntistic music. The choir is 32 elements, and they sing divided into choirs, but they are very often divided in small groups up to 8, 12 vocal lines.
Okay, unfortunately, we don't have the whole recording. I just learned from Mr. Gervasoni before this talk that it was uploaded 2 days ago on Vimeo, so you can find the whole piece now. But we have 3 short excerpts from rehearsals, from the recording.
From rehearsals during COVID time. So I was in Paris. They were rehearsing in Stuttgart, the radio choir from SWR. And we were also recording with not the full choir because they couldn't stay all 32 together. So they had some meters of distance, and we were obliged to overlap the recordings in order to recreate the full choir. So it was really a big work simply for having some sound material to be developed for the electronics.
Okay, let us listen to this.
Yeah,
or
it's,
watch
so it's
this
a partial vision of the score.
I have one last question to ask because it's quite late now. You use electronics in several different pieces, and it seems to be very important for you. What do you think about the relationship of computer, machines, and human beings? And now everyone talks about artificial intelligence and about the future of creativity and how this amazing technology will affect our lives. What do you think about it?
Yeah, so let's say that since I'm not digital native, I try to approach computer and artificial intelligence in the most humanistic way. So they are powerful means, but our intelligence is still, for me, dominant and dominates these machines. That was the same idea of Nono, talking about Nono again, when he spoke about progress in music. So there was a sort of technological progress in music. After tonal music, atonal music, dodecaphonic is a sort of technological process, because dodecaphony, if you want, is a sort of artificial intelligence, how to make melodies by permutation of pitches according to some rules. And of course now, being a dodecaphonic composer could be even easier than at Schoenberg time, because you have plenty of combination and you don't spend a lot of time in finding the magic formula. But for me, this is one case where you can say that the owner of the mechanism is the human being. So then you have to choose. You have plenty of dodecaphonic rows, and then you have to find the most musical. What is the most musical? Is something related to irrational or much deeper intelligence that any artificial intelligence can produce. But maybe one day even this aspect will be erased by an artificial intelligence deciding for us, is it intelligent? We don't know what become, which is what will become the concept of being intelligent, if a machine will do very intelligent. So if you simply need to reduce the effort for repetitive tasks, for me it's completely welcome. If you have to decide because you become lazy and you don't want to spend your time in deciding the good restaurant, you can ask now Google, but it is really, is it really the best? Very often we are deceived by Google choices because we are, even if we are very technological, we are still looking for authenticity. Authenticity is something in art music. That's why art music is more important than entertainment, because art music is something unique. Entertainment, you can ask artificial intelligence to produce plenty of entertainment songs, and they are all beautiful. They are all very efficient in the sense that we can drink and eat and sleep. As a background, they are perfect. But as a unique thing, there's, in my opinion, no artificial intelligence. When we ask the computer to write the new art of fugue or Bach contrapoint, it works, but they are not so deep, not so beautiful, not so peculiar. I cannot find the adjective, not so unique as a Bach counterpoint, original counterpoint. So it's a sort of, I don't know the word in English, simulacre, sort of fake with a
fake reality. Yes.
Yeah, fake reality, with the label of being very refined, but it is something a priori, not really proved by the inner quality of the music object. Speaking about music.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. There's just one last very short excerpt I would like to show you, because I think it's a very moving example on how electronics and human performance can get together. And this is a transcription of yours, of Robert Schumann, piano four-hand piece for piano and live electronics.